So the next technique that I want to talk about, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to say whether or not it's really a composition itself, but it's definitely a technique to get better compositions. Sometimes I like to cover it with compositions, sometimes I don't, but I think it's important either way that it's covered fairly early because it's going to be hard to get really good shots if you're not doing this. And this has entirely to do with the angle. Now, I think you could argue for sure that some shots with very interesting or very extreme angles could definitely be a composition itself, or specifically labeled as a composition, but other ones, I don't know. I feel a little wishy-washy about it. Either way, though, you should be considering it and using it all the time when you're shooting. So I've got some photos here, and to try to better show this, I've done some fantastic drawings that I'll show you in a minute. I'm actually quite a bit better at drawing than that, but it's to get the point across. The artwork isn't the point. So here in this angle, we have some students, and it might not be obvious if you're not that familiar with shooting, but I am not at eye level. I am quite a bit further down. I'm not even at the student's eye level, or at least the one standing here. I'm further down than that. I'm probably about mid-chest level as far as where the camera is. And so if we put a little drawing on top of this, something like that, the camera is somewhere around there. When I was drawing this, I estimated maybe closer to like knee or mid-thigh. But regardless, that's not my normal eye level. My regular eye level would be somewhere way up top here. Don't remember exactly. Probably a little bit higher than that actually, but you get the idea. Now this isn't necessarily that helpful from this viewpoint, so let's kind of turn this sideways so you can hopefully get a little better idea. So if we look at it this way, we have our two martial artists here, and we have sort of the crowd around them. And this little blue stick figure here on the left side represents me, and here's my little camera, shown in pink to be very eye-catching and obvious. And you've got my estimation up there of regular eye level, and you've got the camera with roughly what I'm capturing, these little pink rays that sort of signify kind of the top and bottom of the frame, more or less. It's a quick drawing, a quick sketch and estimate. So you can see here roughly where the camera is, where I'm estimating where it was. And the exact placement doesn't matter. The rough idea, though, is just that you're breaking away from your standard eye level and you're trying other things. And so I'll go through a couple of these and show you about where I had the camera. So I've got another one here. This might seem fairly standard. I think a lot of people see photos like this, and they just assume that the photo was taken at eye level. They don't really think about how the photo was taken, and so when they try to recreate it, it doesn't come out well. So I'm not at my eye level. My eye level is quite a bit higher, so you can see it up top again. And I'm crouched down a little bit, and I'm actually at a certain point because I was very specific, not specific like height-wise as far as measurement goes, but specific in what I could capture. If I go back, I wanted to make sure that I could see both the robot, but also their faces. So I wanted to get as low as possible to be able to see as much of their faces as possible, but also make sure that I can still see the full robot and that this side wall coming diagonally down on the right side doesn't cover any of that. And so I was sort of positioned kind of in between, and I tried to show that a little bit with this sketch here. Not the most clear. And you can see the two little figures, the very rough pink and blue figure and the cyan colored robot there. I like this shot quite a bit, and I like this shot quite a bit for a couple of reasons. So I want to do a couple of things. I always like to try to be a little bit more on eye level with my subject, so that way you can see a little bit more of their face and their emotions and some of that. But I also like this image because you can see what he's working with. Where the robot is, I was able to get it in the frame by ducking lower, and a little bit of the computer here on the left, you can see the actual programming environment as well. So you kind of have almost a complete circle in here. The only thing you don't know what he's doing is you don't know his task. But I still thought it was pretty cool to capture him, his robot, and the programming environment, even if it's not on his computer, on a different student's computer. And so my positioning was crouched down quite a bit. You can see the regular eye level up there. And I wanted to make sure that I could get the robot, him, and a bit of that computer in there. So I've tried to sketch that out a little bit. So I was crouching down quite a bit, maybe about 2 feet or so, something like that. But once again, the exact measurement doesn't matter. It's really more moving to where you feel like you can get the shot that you need and paying attention to what you're seeing in the viewfinder and how changing your angle changes what you're seeing and gets you hopefully closer to what you're trying to capture. So away from people, an insect, right? Now, because it's on the side of a tree or on the side of something, I guess, might not be a tree. It's a tree, but I don't know. Could have been something else, I suppose. This could have been at any height, but he wasn't. He was actually pretty far down on the tree. And so I had to crouch down a whole lot, basically sitting on the ground, to get it right at eye level with the butterfly. I could have taken it from above, but you wouldn't have gotten this nice, clean shot of the wings that way. Alright, moving on. This little guy. So it's like a honeypot ant. There are quite a few things that I did in this that might be less obvious to you. So, 1, I wanted a good amount of negative space. 2, I wanted to make sure that I was able to capture sort of the light moving through his body. Because of their structure and how small they are, you can actually see the light going through him, especially that honeypot butt of his. And then I also wanted there to be a good distinction between him and the background, all of this whiteness, and so I left this blurry, it's part of the top of the canopy, of the jungle canopy, a little bit in the background there. And so the position was kind of like this. I was essentially on the ground to try to have just the right amount where I could still get the light passing through him, but not too far down that I didn't have the top of the canopy, creating that sort of blurry background to give a little bit of contrast between his bright outline and the sky. I didn't want that to get lost. So here's a lizard. This one was actually a little bit trickier because I was trying out a new macro lens, and this macro lens doesn't have any stabilization. And that's sort of an issue for a couple of reasons. Being that it's also a macro lens and it has a very narrow depth of field, which we'll talk about later, it's very easy for things to end up blurry or out of focus or focused on the wrong part. So to get this shot, I'm actually shooting from above, and I've actually got my hand rested on this frame here on the right, this piece of wood, and I have the camera pointing down pretty close to the lizard. And I'm using my hand against the frame to actually stabilize it, because with that being a weird position I'm not used to holding a camera in, it would be very hard to keep the camera still, or even little movements. I mean, it doesn't even have to be shaking, just any little movement would create a blur and would lose the focus. So by stabilizing my hand, I was able to get that shot. And even then, I started to take quite a few shots because I knew that some would end up being blurry. Another lizard. This one is actually from the other angle, so he was down on the ground in the grasses and stuff. And so you've got regular eye level way up there, and sitting on the ground, shooting from below, so you get this more interesting angle of being sort of underneath and having him look down on you. And so you can see the little lizard there, and this upward angle that the camera is pointing in. And this one is a little bit different. This one is from above, as you already know, but it's higher than I could actually normally shoot, and it's significantly higher. So I actually have the camera held up. Luckily, this was with the lens that had stabilization, and I have a little panel that flips out, so I can have it at unusual angles and still be able to see the screen because I can adjust the screen. And so that's what allowed this. And even then, I had to be on a chair. And I didn't draw the other person here, but I had another person just making sure that I didn't fall off. Don't do this unless you have someone with you who will help spot you. Same thing would go for a ladder or something like that. But so a very overhead angled shot. I actually like this for two reasons. This one brings in sort of an over-the-shoulder viewpoint. We have a figure here, and we can see what they're doing, and so you get sort of this sort of this almost like first person feel, although you're not seeing from first person, you're still third person, but you're seeing sort of what they're seeing to some degree, which I like to use a fair amount. I don't always use the actual pictures, but I almost always try it and see if I like how it turned out. Now, the other reason that I like this is because there's a picture in this picture, which is also an unusual angle, focused from above as well, just from a different viewpoint, which I also took. And so here's sort of the angle here. So sort of from behind and a little bit above, pointing downwards-ish towards the ring material. And that angle actually is probably a little bit more of a downward angle. That camera's probably a little bit higher up to get the actual angle here, but you get the idea. And once again, you don't always know exactly where it is until you're trying it out. A lot of the times you put it there, and you're like, oh, not quite, so you move it over a little bit, and you kind of find what you're looking for in your viewfinder.